one of the things, we were just talking about this a second ago because I was asking for the Jimmy Kimmel clips from last night, which made me side with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you got 7 minutes. You got 7 minutes with 10 writers, and you got days to do it. It's got to be not education shaming. Like, it's got to be banger after banger. You got a team of writers. You're at the top of Disney. You're fighting with someone who's now paid like you. Not Aaron Rodgers. He's paid better than you. Pat McAfee, you're fighting in-house. That's got to be killer. Like, or does it have to be vetted by lawyers and then can't be killer?
I mean, I guess there are certain. When I was watching that, Dan, I was wondering, did this have trouble going through legal and internal review? Because I found myself getting mad as I watched it because it was on. The clip came out during the national championship game, and so it was 8 minutes of not a single laugh, and I got to imagine it got diluted somehow. He's been off for several weeks. How is that the best shot?
Well, this is one of the things that I wanted to say about that, and we don't want to play it because I didn't think it was funny, and I thought it was boring, and I don't want to eat up 8 minutes of show just playing this. But what I did find interesting about the reaction is I did see political leanings just appear there all of a sudden with this is a hysterical takedown just because it's a takedown. And I thought to myself as I was watching this, you realize that the people who don't like Kimmel to begin with or side with Aaron Rodgers or are just different politically entirely on this, they're looking at this and saying, this is not funny in any way. Kimmel's not funny. That's what they're saying as they watch this because they're skewed, but I wanted that to be funny. I was rooting for that to be funny.
Same, and it wasn't funny. The education shaming was lame. The only decent joke was that the only A's he got on his report card were both in Aaron, but that wasn't even very funny. And I can already tell you what Aaron Rodgers is going to say in response. He's going to say that Kimmel doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not a Trump supporter. They all group us together. He's going to ask how much Pfizer's paying him. He's going to make jokes about the vaccine and go all the way back to the beginning. Then he's going to claim he's part of the media elite. You can take a shot every time you hear one of those phrases that comes up online because that's all Aaron Rodgers does is he just regurgitates that same stuff.
This is part of why this argument gets so poisonous, though, and has been dishonest. If you can't look at this stuff and separate yourself in a discerning fashion from your belief system and what's just objectively funny because you're not going to be outraged, what you should be watching here is a man who hosted the Oscars multiple times. This man is great at pressurized funny. Had the shot of his lifetime here.
This is about more than that. This is he was deeply offended by this, and to make light of this situation,
he was wounded. Mike's
kind
right.
of undercuts what's been going on politically behind the scenes.
Understood, Mike. But deeply offended is getting in the way of all funny right now. From every angle, deeply offended is affecting all of funny.
Sometimes with comedians, when you're thinking too much, it's never going to be as funny. Chris Rock had a year plus on Will Smith. Came out and did something. It wasn't funny.
Also pressurized.
Yeah,
sounded
pressurized.
emotional.
It's also there are several things happening behind the scenes that could offer as a diluter to the funny. I know you want uncensored funny here, but I saw that and it was clearly washed out by Suits.
And this is something that I think is fascinating when you get into corporate interests and entertainment dilution and where we're headed, where it's going to be Apple and Amazon making all of these choices, and they're going to go through a dozen executives, and they're going to go through a dozen lawyers, and are we going to make sure that we want to be this honest here? And I'm listening now, right now in my car, when Netflix is a joke is all I've got on. And you mentioned some of what it is that we're talking about when you say Chris Rock, because I listened to that special, and as I'm listening to it, just driving around, I'm like, man, he knows he's on the high wire here where everyone's watching, and he's repeating himself, and he's live, and he's choking, because this one is so personal. So he just keeps saying bitch and bitch and bitch at Will Smith, saying that everyone is saying bitch and bitch and bitch. And what I'm thinking to myself is this was so embarrassing for Chris Rock that he cannot find the place to hit the right notes on funny because it hurt him too much. And you're telling me the same thing is true here of Kimmel, which I get. Of course, if you're accused of pedophilia and that's the move, and you have kids and you're deeply offended, and now you're going straight to Iger and saying McAfee and Aaron Rodgers can't do that to me, can they? And then now everything's running through Iger's office on whatever Kimmel's monologue is, because he's got a fight with the guy at ESPN that they just paid $17 million a year and doesn't care about their constructs.
Well, we have a clip. It's just under 2 minutes, so you can make your decisions for yourself. I think we've offered enough qualifiers here as to why it might not be funny. Someone in our audience might find it funny. Here it is.
He decided to insinuate that I am a pedophile. This is how these nuts do it now. You don't like Trump, you're a pedophile. It's their go-to move, and it shows you how much they actually care about pedophilia. But here's the thing. I spent years doing sports. I've seen guys like him before. Aaron Rodgers has a very high opinion of himself. Because he had success on the football field, he believes himself to be an extraordinary being. He genuinely thinks that because God gave him the ability to throw a ball, he's smarter than everyone else. The idea that his brain is just average is unfathomable to him. We learned during COVID, somehow he knows more about science than scientists. A guy who went to community college, then got into Cal on a football scholarship and didn't graduate, someone who never spent a minute studying the human body, is an expert in the field of immunology. He just put on a magic helmet, and that G made him a genius. Aaron got 2 A's on his report card. They were both in the word Aaron, okay? And can you imagine that this hamster-brained man thinks he knows what the government is up to because he's a quarterback doing research on YouTube and listening to podcasts. I looked it up. This is actually a thing. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people with limited competence in a particular domain overestimate their abilities. In other words, Aaron Rodgers is too arrogant to know how ignorant he is. They let him host Jeopardy for 2 weeks. Now he knows everything. And by the way, I'm not one of those people who thinks athletes and members of the sports media should stick to talking about sports. I think Aaron Rodgers has the right to express any opinion he wants to, but saying someone is a pedophile is not an opinion, nor is it trash talk. Sorry, Pat McAfee.
What I would say to you is right at the center of that, you will find a lot of the division and the discourse in America where it goes wrong. Because Jimmy Kimmel telling a whole lot of people who are on Aaron Rodgers' side how dumb Aaron Rodgers is typical Hollywood liberal elite condescension that has this country on the cusp of what feels like civil war.
Yeah, it's obvious that he was deeply offended. He felt slandered. Yeah, I'm surprised a lawsuit might not come out of this. But that sounded like a laugh track. There was so much laughter for stuff that wasn't even funny. I think the way to play that, if I'm Kimmel, is 2 minutes of dismissive funny, not 8 minutes of way too serious. But Disney on ESPN Crime is a good thing.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we're talking about it right now.
No, that's not,
yes,
the views on all those social clips are crushing, and I am so into what Aaron Rodgers says today. Like, I'm tuning into all this. Like,
exactly.
My dad's not wrong in that everyone was listening to what Kimmel said last night, and everyone is going to be watching Pat McAfee
They
today.
share this in common. I mean, they do, Greg and Chris.
Of course, Disney will win here, but the funny in it, the actual funny, is stumbling into the victories in the streaming age, because this is why I say
they pay Aaron Rodgers $1 million. They're not stumbling into it. They're paying him with the intention of him going viral, and he does weekly.
Mike, Disney's not paying Aaron Rodgers anything. Pat McAfee is paying Aaron Rodgers. Pat McAfee.
It's all right. It's an allotted budget for Pat McAfee's show.
No, but this part's important. This part matters. The renegade spaceship of Pat McAfee is being rented by Disney and ESPN because they need it and him more than he needs them. He tore up a contract that was worth more than ours, which is an industry changer. Tore it up to go get their reach. They have these problems now, and they've never been a company that's equipped for these problems because they don't want the talent to have the power to make these problems. Because the way the ESPN spaceship works is Just get us from SportsCenter to SportsCenter to SportsCenter to game without headlines for Disney that make a mess.
Get us there safely.
Please, just without politics, without anything. Mike Greenberg, please, just get us to the next show. This is what's worked for many years.
To the next Greenie show.
Well, you don't think there's a sea change because, one business day removed from calling an upper executive a rat, Pat McAfee's front and center on their college football playoff coverage. That's not something anyone's ever been able to get away with.
That's the sea change. And now it rises up to Kimmel and Iger. And now Iger has to deal with Jimmy Kimmel being so pissed off and personally offended. Hey, I'm going to send my team of writers at this, okay? For days. Yeah, let's check with the lawyers on that.
I really think what was hanging over it, and in that 2-minute clip of Jimmy Kimmel, I actually found it funnier the second pass because
it's not funny as 8 minutes. It's the 2 minutes by itself that makes it funny.
Precisely. And I think just the specter of Jimmy Kimmel himself threatening a lawsuit on social media means that Jimmy Kimmel handcuffed himself. Because if he starts joking about it, he is then giving Aaron Rodgers and Pat McAfee's show license to make fun of it. And when the dismount on that is, nor is it trash talk Pat McAfee, so he's not absolving Pat of blame. So when that is the point he wants to hammer home, he can't necessarily be lighthearted because he is trying to project how seriously he took that allegation.
Understood, Mike. You're leading a late-night talk show. Make me a bicycle clown. You're supposed to be funny.
Yeah, but I lose all credibility if I start making jokes about that when the gambit into all of this was me being offended.
I know.
If I start having more fun with it than Pat or Aaron Rodgers, I lose my hand.
But that's where the funny goes to die. My point is that Jimmy Kimmel...
But that's also where your argument goes to die, Dan.
Because
behind the scenes, this is a political power play, and he's sending emails and correspondence via agents and whatnot because he is deeply offended by this. If he just undoes everything with a joke, then the last 2 weeks have been nonsense.
But he's got several writers to allow him to navigate that however it needs to be navigated. And what ends up happening, that Disney and ESPN, you would understand why they're trying to avoid it, is Jimmy Kimmel is using the first 8 minutes of that giant platform when people are tuning in, and that is good for business. They want to hear what Jimmy has to say about this, and people don't tune into late-night television anymore as appointment stuff.
That's why the 8-minute clip came out well before his show aired, because that's how late-night primarily exists now.
And so they will be able to profit off it. They will be able to change. I don't know which part of my argument you think is going to die here. This is wonderful and fascinating as content. But when I say we arrive at it by accident, it's because when they put these ingredients together at a place that they've never allowed this kind of thing. They've avoided all precedents, and the McAfee precedents are now, he has actual power to call out a shadow president by name, embarrass him, and then come on the air the day of the national championship and say again, bleep off, I'm here to do it my way. I'm not changing for my audience. You empower him.
That's pretty rad. While wearing a cowboy hat. Very mavericky.
With several people wearing a cowboy hat. When he wore long sleeves on whatever was the next day of him having to navigate, now all the suits are in my ear trying to screw up everything I'm here to do. They hired Rush Limbaugh to do a thing. Rush Limbaugh left weeks later because he was Rush Limbaugh. They've hired Pat McAfee to be a professional wrestler and rescue the idea they don't know how to make this stuff on their own. They don't know how to make the dangerous stuff on their own. They don't know how to make the most honest stuff on their own.
They don't look to, when they acquire Pat McAfee, they know the danger, but they don't look to acquire the dangerous thing. They look to acquire the digital video property that makes them an industry leader because that's how Disney does things. Let's just buy the thing that makes us a leader.